good afternoon and good morning, everyone. It's 3 p.m. in Europe, 2 p.m. in London, and 9 a.m. in New York. And this is the very first time when I actually can say it, because it's the very first time when Merixstudio is having a guest from the other side of Atlantic. Ladies and gentlemen, please meet Dr. Maria Blekher. Maria, if you could tell a few words about yourself.
Absolutely. So pleasure to be here, Mike, speaking to you from across the pond or the Atlantic. So Dr. Maria Blekher, behavioral scientist by training, turned into startup growth strategist and investor. And as you just mentioned, I'm based in New York. You can or cannot tell by my accent, I'm an Israeli. But for the past 10 years, actually, I've been residing in New York, working with early stage startup founders and investors, helping them to accelerate their journey to the American market. Everything that goes from strategy design to research, biz dev, securing their next round of funding, and of course, probably the most important, finding the right customers, the right market, and the right partners. That's very, very briefly.
Thank you very much for this. Yes, I remember that we actually had difficulty to define your role because you are a person of many talents. Today we will be discussing difficult, tough topics. As we all know, recent months in the world's economy, we have been witnessing recession, inflation, lack of funding among the startup scene. This is why, despite the fact that the show takes place in May, we call it Winter in Tech, actually. Lots of founders have been witnessing difficulties, for example, in securing funding rounds. So my first question will touch partially the situation and a little bit your background. You're a behavioral scientist. How people usually react to crisis?
So yeah, that's we're talking about winter. I would say, if you've been around for long enough, economy is going up and then going down and then goes up and then goes down. So it's a tendency. So it's nothing new under the sky. Having said that, definitely being in the midst of this experience can be very, very stressful, especially if you are a founder of a startup. So, not without going into depth into behavioral science, we all know the stress response of a freeze or flight or foam. I would not necessarily apply those to the way startups respond, but startups are ended up being run by people. So we can assume that there is some of our human behavior and human response that is being transferred into the way startups respond to the stressful situation. Having said that, as companies, we tend to function in slightly different way and adjust our responses differently. But yeah, as humans, we definitely respond to stress, and it shows, and I think you can see it today in many companies.
Okay, thank you very much for this. You work at 97212 Venture Capital. So you're a little bit on the other side. Yes, you work with startups. How VCs react to the current situation? What is your strategy on investment? What are your thoughts? What are the plans to handle with the current situation?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and I'll answer it, from different perspectives. So I'm actually, in my day job, I'm running the YU Innovation Lab, which is essentially a hub for early stage startups in New York, based in YU. And I hold the position as a board member for the 97212 fund in New York. So I got to see startups from before they fundraise till after they fundraise. And I have to say that from the investor perspective, you definitely see a change, not necessarily a negative one, since every crisis is an opportunity. And as cliche as it sounds, what it created and what it prompted startups to do is to be much more precise about their business model. If we would been having this conversation last year, you would see, and I could tell you about startups that raised seed funding based on a great presentation, great story, great idea. This is almost not happening these days. So if you're an early stage founder and you have an idea, that's great. But to raise your first check, even the pre-seed one, you need to demonstrate much more than a great deck and a nice speech. So in a way, it creates startups that are more mature, that are doing more work and more research before they're raising funds, and hopefully eventually it will lead to the creation and development of companies that are better catering to the needs of the market, that have better potential to financially succeed, and as we see, yield higher returns to investors.
Okay, thank you for this. I always love the sentence which says every difficulty is an opportunity in disguise. Yes. So some assets within the market are basically, they're not disappearing, they're just moving into different directions. Yes. So this is something that we should seek. Okay, but what about the startups themselves? Yeah, those who've been on a path of, let's say, development, reaching another funding round, getting bootstrapped, and so on. What they should do now? Yes, especially those who for example, run out of funding, or let's say are in the midst of, for example, entering the market with their service or with their product. Yeah, what they can do when they are right before making it happen and they basically lacking of funds.
Yeah, again, that's that's a big question, and as a sidebar, it's always easier to give advice than to be in the trenches. But being in the trenches as well, I can share what I see from the various perspectives. So if you're a startup and you already have some funding and you have a runway, you need to do everything you can to extend it. So if you were planning, to use this money for the next 3 months, make it last 6 or 8. What it actually means, being very practical, you need to be much more efficient and much more effective in how you spend your money and in what you do. And I think we can see it in the, want to say, in the workplace, in the startup world. The layoffs are part of increasing efficiency. Cutting off, all the extras are increasing efficiency. Focusing on the core is increasing efficiency. Focusing on getting paying customers is increasing efficiency. So if the buzzword last year or 2 years ago was growth, right? We were all talking about you need to grow, and it doesn't matter that you spend more money on customer acquisition than you generate. We ask startups essentially to demonstrate growth. Today, the conversation is, well, we want to see that you can actually generate not only income, but maybe even become profitable. Not, best case scenario is kind of self-sustainable, but even not going there, today the focus is much more on viable business models, which is in a way very traditional way to look at businesses, and startups we're used, and we're still looking at growth, but it's kind of coming back to, well, essentially it's a business and you need to make money. Doesn't mean that you don't need to grow, but you need to have this proof that your startup, that your idea, your solution, whatever is that you are offering to the market, has a market, has people, companies that are willing to pay for it and that are actually paying. And you need to show that it has a scale. So in a way, if you're a startup, that's where you need to put all your focus, making yourself much more efficient and effective in the way you're running your operations, and focus as much as you can on your target market, on your customers. If you already have customers, be there, talk to them, understand better their needs, because it is likely that they are experiencing the same crisis. Even if you were selling to large enterprises in the US, they are also, they experience different type of crisis, but they are also in efficiency and effectiveness mode. So see what solutions, and you as startups, we have the benefit of being more agile than large corporations. So if you can pivot, or if you can create a solution that can that can cater to a specific need that one of your customers is currently dealing with, like you're creating win for the long run. So I would say definitely effectiveness, efficiency, and deep dive into the pains of your customers, and be the one solving for their pains, and that's your pathway to growth and to raising the next funding round, and basically staying in the business. Because what I would say that today, if you're not providing this very, very tangible value, the chances for you to survive are significantly lower. That's the reality.
Thank you for this. I must admit that also in my, let's say, professional life in the last 6-12 months, I'm, let's say, observing similar aspects, yes, similar signs, yes. We used to joke here at Merix that, there used to be lots of people coming to us with things that we would call, for example, Uber for funeral industry or something like that, yeah. Crazy ideas coming every 2 weeks. And now there is, let's say, lower amount of inquiries coming, but they have much more solid foundation, yeah. Things related, for example, to supply chains, things related, for example, to efficiency, energy consumption, yeah, something that are, let's say, lesser in terms of bells and whistles, but something that actually secures, for example, securing or reducing consumer goods in many different ways. So I must agree with that. You work in the United States, you are from Israel, you had the chance, for example, to observe, obviously, something that is also widely spread, layoffs, yes? So there's perhaps not plenty, but let's say a little bit of additional workforce available also for startups, yes, engineers, designers, and so on, yes. So perhaps this is some sort of an opportunity for those smaller initiatives, yes, where we have, let's say, 3 or 4 founders working at WeWork somewhere in Brooklyn, yeah. Is this a chance for them, or they need to basically wait for a better moment?
Listen, I think you just said it. As we started, it's a cliche, but every crisis can be an opportunity for some people. And assuming you are in the pool of people that can turn this crisis into opportunity, and you have a startup, and you are in a point where you need to hire people, or you can hire people, or you want to grow your team, or you're looking for a co-founder to join you for equity because you don't have money to pay. I think today you can find top talent that you could not afford or access, again, even a year ago, out there. People who are not only coming from startups that are kind of going out of business, but people who were working for the Googles of the world, right? We're looking at the big 4. People who were there up until a month ago are not there. If these are the people that you're seeking to add to your team, this is a great opportunity because on top of that, you see a lot of these people, and again, from multiple conversations I had, seeking these new experiences. So if you spend 10 years in Google, you've learned a lot, you've developed great things, you or someone else, the person you are looking for, might be ready for a different kind of a ride. And so you can bring into your team people with a lot of experience, in the corporate world, a lot of knowledge, and very motivated to embark on this journey. Again, it's all about people, especially with startups, early stage, small teams. Every team member can make or break a company. So hiring is an entire big topic that requires definitely a separate conversation. But today there is a great opportunity to find amazing people who are motivated, who have the experience and the know-how, and can take your startup to the next level, can enrich the team, can be your partner, a co-founder, your first or second employee. You need to find them, and you need to nurture the connections and develop the network and build the relationships. But it's definitely an opportunity to make great hires for a startup.
Of course, thank you for this. To people who are watching us at the moment, you can watch us using LinkedIn as well as YouTube. We highly encourage you to leave some additional questions using comment sections, both LinkedIn and YouTube. Yes, so if any questions are coming from the audience, please feel free to ask them. Okay, then. So then my next question would be, excuse me, how to develop a product effectively at the current stage? What kind of risks can we, let's say, foresee? We talk a little bit about the talent pool, we talk a little bit about the funding, but what else can we eventually expect in current circumstances?
I would say, and I'm coming from behavioral science, so I spent years in trying to research how people are making decisions. So everything I do is kind of obsessed with the consumer or the user or the target market. And I've been saying it was true before the current situation, and it will remain true after it. Focus on your target audience, focus on really understanding them and their challenges, and then solving for those challenges. So what we see very often is, I'm a founder, I have an idea, and I'm sure that there is a pain that this idea solves for, and I speak to my closest friends, and they say, oh yeah, Maria, that's a great idea. You should definitely go on and build this company. And 2 years ago, if I was Maria and I could put together a nice deck and put together a good team, I might be even able to raise some funding. Doesn't work like that anymore, and Mike, just like you said, like Uber for something, unless it really solves a real pain, unlikely to happen. So the better you understand your target market, the higher the chances that you will develop a solution that will be adapted. And again, a solution that has been adapted generates income, generates profitability, you can raise funding, you can grow your team. To add to this, there is a great book by Uri Levin, one of the co-founders of Waze, that is called Fall in Love with the Problem, Not the Solution. If you haven't read it, I strongly recommend. Has zero interest, but Uri was a pleasure hosting him a couple of months ago in New York. And I'm sure you're familiar with Waze. The entire book and he co-founded other companies and he's done his other great things, but the entire conversation and I resonate a lot with what we're saying now is focus on the problem, focus on the market. Investors are important and everybody are important, but the most important people or organizations in this journey are your customers, whether it's people or organizations, and the problem you're solving. If you're obsessed with the problem and with the market, you will build something meaningful that solves the problem for the right market. If you're focused on the other pieces, they might be important, but you will not end up where you're aiming at, especially not in the current financial situation.
All right. Yes. Well, thank you for this. This is something, let's say, pretty much standing in line with, let's say, my experiences from the recent months. Yeah. We're in the office right here, and right behind the wall that I'm sitting here, there's a team of our, let's say, designers and researchers, and very often we ask a question: how great percentage of users will be, for example, in the need of the feature that you want to build? And in the previous months, it was like this, that this was unknown. The feature was cool, so let's introduce it. And now what you can see is that there is a lower amount of founders, but the founders that are coming now, they're actually capable to answer such question. Yeah, like they did their homework. Yeah, like we, for example, need this sort of registration, or we need this security layer because 40 or 60% of our users will gonna need it. Yeah, and a couple of months ago, people were coming with some funding, and such factors were unknown for them, and now they're known. Yeah, so let's say there's like a double validation done when a founder is about to build a product.
Yeah, it's exactly time because being Israeli, interrupting what you're saying, it's exactly what you said is a great example. It's really knowing what you're building and not building features for the sake of building them, and developing a technology purposefully and not for the sake of I'm going to develop this great thing and we'll figure out the market later. First, identify the problem, understand it, understand the people or organizations that are dealing with the problem, and then develop a solution. So that's what your example is, just exactly how it should work and how it seems to work these days.
Yes. Okay, then another chapter of our conversation. One of the most talked topics is the, let's say, decreasing valuation of startups. Yes, so we have, let's say, some market value that has been estimated, but it has been estimated 6 months ago. And obviously, like everything, like currencies, like gold, like oil, it also may change. Yeah, especially when the startup's only asset is their intellectual property. So as an investor, what do you take to changing valuations, and what would be your advice for startups that are fundraising while their valuation is basically dropping down?
Wow, that's a big question, and I would say that over the past 2 years, especially if we were looking at 2021 and the first half of 2022. One would argue, and I would not name the one, but if you'll speak to investors, you'll see that there was a notion in the market that the valuations and the company's valuations were kind of inflated, aka valuations were significantly higher than what they should have been in reality. Multiple reasons, starting with relatively cheap money in the market, very low interest rates. When you have cheap money, it ends up with inflation, both that the global economic world is experiencing now, but in startups it just it plays out in very, very high valuations that didn't always represented the actual, let's put it, the business value that we were just discussing, right? So in a way, what you see now is you see valuations going back to normal.
Okay.
More accurately representing the risk and the potential market value. And if you're a founder, it's not the best experience, but in terms of market, it is sort of a fix to what seemed to be valuation of overpriced startups and valuations that were way too high. So yes, definitely you will see startups today that are either raising the next round of funding, best case scenario at the same level, or going for a down round, and that's also happened. If you are still able to fundraise today, whether it's your, you raised pre-seed and now you're raising seed, you raised seed and now you're able to raise Series A, first of all, if you're able to raise, take the money. Just because you need to create this, you need to have a runway, you need to keep developing your product, you need to keep grow, you need to keep generating revenue, if you want to keep your startup. And because what we're experiencing now will pass, right? We know that it's a wave, and I don't know if we're at the bottom of it or it's going, or like we're gonna go lower, and then, but it will change. So you want to build yourself and to prepare yourself to the pivotal moment. So where, the market shifts, you can explode. in a positive perspective. So your valuation is lower, or you're raising less money than you expected. Again, be more efficient. If you are still able to raise, it means that someone out there believes in you. Even if these are your investors, it means that you were able to prove that you have demand in the market, that you actually solving a real problem. So it's valuation. It's, again, valuation is, we're in a business world, so money matters. But I would say good founders are not, and good startups are not fixated on the valuation, because if you end up delivering the value, then your next round will be it will figure itself out, and the money will be kind of course, theoretically you could be in a different position, but this is the situation now. These are the valuations. If you don't need to raise money, and you are bootstrapped and you're generating revenue, and you can allow yourself to wait, maybe it's a good idea. And you're self-sustainable, maybe it's a good idea not to raise now and wait another 6 months or another year. If you need to raise, and there are people out there and VCs out there that are ready to write you a check, make the best of it. That's accept the situation, focus on the problem, focus on developing the best solution, focus on the market, and build the great company that you were set to build from day one.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for this. We have a question coming from the audience. Jan Kupczak is asking, quote, Maria, could you name which industry from your perspective has the most potential, let's say, in the startup world? Which industry?
Again, good question. Without kind of being a fortune teller, I would say in general, it's been always more. Let's start with what would be more difficult, and then what would have more potential. And speaking of potential, it's just in terms of fundraising at this specific moment. And I do want to say that everything, this entire conversation is true to this specific moment, because 2 months from now, a miracle can happen, hopefully like a good one, and the entire economical situation will change, and the conversations will be completely different. It might be a different one, right? So it's been always more difficult to fundraise for hardware products, right? And for food tech and biotech and the industries that require higher numbers and significant seed rounds. Having said that, if we're looking at what has more potential, I would say that cybersecurity, though we've seen a lot of the biggest cybersecurity companies like laying off people, the threats are still there, and they're not going anywhere. So cybersecurity startups that provide solutions that are either better than what already exists, or cater to new markets, or solve different problems, are probably still going to be able to raise, but again, pending validation, pending traction. OpenAI is out there, so startups that will be able either to utilize it or to help the larger corporations that are not necessarily tech leaders to adopt these technologies might have a good chance. Again, because it all goes back to efficiency and effectiveness, and being, there is this metaphor of are you a painkiller or a vitamin? There is a market and there are buyers for painkillers and for vitamins. But in times of crisis, and when you have a really, really bad headache, you'll pay for the painkiller. So I would say any industry that solves a real pain, heals or kills it, has higher potential than industries that are very important but are traditional looked at as more long run industries. So like biotech is very, very important, and it is literally physically painkiller in a way, right? But the time frames are so long, so you need a very visionary VC or very visionary investors to put money that will create a painkiller 15 years from today. So I would look at it from this perspective. If you're in an industry that kills or solves for actual pain for someone else, again, if we're looking at B2B, and for many B2Bs now, the embedding and incorporating and integrating AI technologies would be a painkiller, because if they will not do that, they would be outcompeted by those who do.
Mm-hmm.
So that can be an entire field or an entire industry for startups to step in.
Okay, thank you very much for this. Okay, then we don't have any more questions. However, we encourage questions coming from the audience. We have few minutes. We have still few couple of minutes. Okay, then. What are your recommendations then for startups that have not reached their Series A funding? Yeah, that they never done anything like that. What they can do in the current circumstances?
So if you're looking at startups that haven't raised Series A but raised pre-seed or seed, assuming that they have some runway, they need, and taking the risk of repeating myself, be out there in the market speaking to their existing customers, providing even better service, providing even better solutions, being there, providing solutions for new challenges. This is the way. If we're looking at their next fundraising, and one of the challenges now that, again, to raise Series A, you need to meet certain milestones, right? And those milestones are suddenly more significant than they were a year or 2 years ago. To reach those milestones, you need more customers. So it all goes back to kind of, you need customers, you need validation, you need to provide a good solution, and you need your customers to be willing to pay for this solution. If you have enough of this and you're demonstrating growth and scalability, you'll get your Series A, whether it might not be as the same numbers that you expected to raise last year, but it will happen. Again, as long as you meet the milestones.
Okay, thank you for this. It seems like we've got another question coming from a LinkedIn user. This time, the person, we do not know who that person is, but we have a question. Maria, what do you think about AI technology? Will it help or hurt startups in their development?
That's a beautiful question, and the answer is, it depends, right? Like everything in life, if OpenAI is, or ChatGPT, or any one of the new AI companies are solving the same problem that a startup is using, just faster and cheaper, well, Houston, we have a problem. We might need a pivot. However, having said that, if you can incorporate this technology into your product, making it, again, much more efficient and effective, cutting costs on hiring more people or hiring more designers or whatever it is that you're doing, then it's definitely a huge plus. So it really depends on what kind of business you're in, and if you can use the technology to improve what you're doing. And again, we're looking at AI, the lowest hanging fruit, it improves efficiency and effectiveness. So I would say it's here to stay, and you can try to ignore it. Probably not the best kind of pathway or not the best solution. If you can find a way to incorporate it into what you're doing, chances are that you're gonna be more successful and more effective. If you are if you're competing head in direct competition, it can be a good timing to reconsider your business model, or reconsider your product, or to look what else is possible. But theoretically, it is here, so you might as well make the best of it.
Okay, thank you for this. As mentioned in the beginning of our, by the way, thank you to both of our viewers who asked their questions. So once again, coming back to the, let's say, beginning of our conversation, you are Israeli living in New York. So how do you see the current market status influence on early stage startups who are seeking, let's say, market or funding in United States in general? Yes, there are, let's say, startups from Israel, Europe, and so on, and they want to enter United States, which can be tricky. Yeah, how this situation can influence them.
So yeah, and the vast majority of Israeli startups, and that's a great question. Thank you, Mike. Both Israeli, but we also see startups coming from Europe to target and to enter and to cater to the American market, because essentially, it's big. And it was never easy to begin with, entering a new market, starting with the cultural differences, and not speaking about the language differences and the business culture and the time difference. So I'm putting everything aside because it always existed. It might be even more trickier today because of the changing economic landscape, aka even the large American corporations are kind of trying to increase efficiency, effectiveness, and might be more risk aversive. Meaning, if you are interested in working with financial institutions in the US, it's been always a long journey. Today, it might be even more complicated because you'll have to check more boxes. That's on the one hand. On the other side, and this is really, that's why I'm saying, everything, it's not black or white. It's very, so many different variables are included and affecting your position, your situation. On the other hand, with this desire to increase, to be very lean and focused and efficient and effective, you might be surprised to find that there is more willingness to experiment and take risks with new solutions to solve existing problems. So you might actually find, again, depending on the sector, depending on your solution, that companies out there that 6 months ago would not respond to your email or your call when you were suggesting or offering them a cooperation or partnership, or running a POC with them, which is very often what early stage startups need, right? All they need is someone, a partner in the US, and very often for a very, very low payment, just to be the design partner or just to run a POC. To me, to see that the solution that was developed somewhere in Europe or in Israel or in any other place in the world actually works in the US market, solves the problem. There are chances for some industries that today it is more likely to happen because companies, whether again, I will put financial institution aside because a lot of regulation, but even if you look at universities, you might see more open-mindedness to try new things because we are in a changing landscape. And so on the one hand, companies are much more focused on their core businesses. On the other hand, they're looking for solutions. And so again, if you solve for a real problem, it might be a great timing for you to develop your go-to-market strategy and go for it. Not only develop, like actually implement.
Okay, thank you for this. I believe that we will be reaching the final question for today. What are the lessons learned? What can be done better in the future? among startup world, what founders can do better, what kind of lessons they take from the events of the recent months?
That's a big one. You know, on the more philosophical level, I want to say in finance and the business world and the startup world, in life, it's ups and downs, right? It comes in waves. So when you're on top and money is cheap, you need to kind of internalize or keep somewhere in your mind that that's not going to last forever, and maybe start building an efficient operation from day one. It's again easier said than done, because when there is a feeling of abundance of money in startups and it's easy to raise, then there is this tendency to splurge. But I think that the current situation actually is a good lesson for all of us, and for current founders and the next generation of founders, those who are now starting their companies, and the people who will be starting companies in the next few years, to keep in mind that even when the money is cheap, there are better ways to use it. So building better, more efficient operations, focusing on the business model from day one. Again, I'm sure that in a few years we'll go back to like growth, but there will be people, and those will be probably the more successful companies in the end, that will start thinking about the business model and how they create value and how they generate revenue. Not necessarily later on, but at least to have that in mind. And overall, specifically now we had a question about AI. I think this is something that everyone should be asking themselves, how this new technology, if your startup is not AI based, and many of them are based AI, but those who are not, how this can impact either my business and my product and my solution, or my target market. And so we're speaking about the importance of the target market, for 60% probably of today's conversation. So it's not only how it affects me, but how it affects the organizations I serve. And so this is something to keep in mind, and that too shall pass, right? So overall, it might be a winter now, but after winter, spring comes, and that's just the way of nature. So keep some optimism in mind that it might be a difficult situation now. Use it to do everything you can to improve your product, better learn your customers, adjust, increase effectiveness, embed and integrate AI solutions, and wait for the pivot, for this moment where the market is going to shift, because it will eventually.
Of course, thank you. I really like these words. After every winter, spring is coming. So perhaps this is something that we should all keep in mind. Maria, thank you very much for joining, for being with us today. Ladies and gentlemen, wherever you are, if you would like to consult with Maria, with VC funding that she's representing, please feel free to reach out over LinkedIn. She may possibly help you, support you in your operations with some advice and so on. If you would be, of course, interested in building a product or service these days, feel free to reach out to me. I will be happy to help you with our team here of engineers and designers also. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all on both sides of the Atlantic. Have a great day and have a great rest of the week. Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye. Thank you, Mike. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.